Hello, everyone. Welcome to our ReggieCon panel discussing the Good Asian in celebration of Asian Pacific Heritage Month. My name is Jana Albrecht. I'm the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management here at Illinois State University. And before we begin the panel, I just have a few details to keep everything running smoothly for all of us. So first, we do record the session and it will get posted to the ReggieCon website. Second, if you are in need of confirmation of attendance tonight, don't worry, we'll post a link towards the end and you can complete that. Third, we will monitor the chat, and we do encourage you to ask questions. It's the presenter's favorite part of the panel. So please go ahead and ask those questions as often as you want and as early as you want, but just remember that the panelists might not get to your questions right away. So last update, and it's really just a reminder to check our ReggieCon website for previous panels and to stay in the know for future panels and events. So enough about housekeeping. At this time, I am pleased to introduce our fearless leader, Dr. Scott Jordan. Dr. Jordan is the former chair of psychology here at Illinois State. He also happens to be our moderator and a panelist for tonight's discussion. So Scott, please take it away.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Albrecht. Welcome to the last episode of Season 5 of ReggieCon, the con that asks the question, what's your story? I'm Dr. Scott Jordan, aka Zombie Scotty. I'm a cognitive scientist philosopher here at Illinois State University. And tonight we come together to celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month with a discussion of the Eisner award-winning graphic novel, The Good Asian, with its award-winning author, Pornsak Pincetchote. Joining me in tonight's discussion of this amazing piece of work is a crew of fantastic pop culture aficionados. And first, we have clinical counseling psychologist, Dr. Suejung Han. Suejung, please come on in and tell the audience who you are and what you do.
Hi, everyone. My name is Suejung Han. I'm an associate professor in counseling psychology here at ISU. And I worked with Dr. Jordan 3 times on serving similar panels discussing meanings of identity and culture as reflected and manifested in pop culture and movies and shows. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. Next, we have school psychologist, Dr. Shengtian Wu. Shengtian, please come in and tell the audience a little something about who you are and what you do.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Shengtian Wu, an assistant professor at ISU School Psych Programs. I also, like Dr. Han, has been invited to Dr. Scott Jordan's fantastic podcast. I think that one of it was The Last of Us, and there was a Netflix show, Beef, and there was a Squid Game. You know, it was all my favorite shows and stuff. And it's always cool to discuss about culture and also social phenomena in a psychological standpoint, in cultural standpoints too, And I'm very excited to talk about, Asian Americans with this fantastic comics, The Good Asian.
No, that's fantastic. So glad to see you again. And next up, a ReggieCon alum, Dr. Lorran Garrison. Lorran, please come in and tell everybody who you are and what you do. I think you're muted, Lorran.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Thank you.
Yay! I'm actually not a doctor, so let me clarify. So I am.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I like it though.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lorran Garrison. I'm a school psychologist out here in Northern California, out in East Bay area. I'm working at a performing arts charter school, and I talk and I speak at various places such as San Diego Comic-Con, WonderCon, all of those, National Association of School Psychologists, California Association of School Psychologists. I'm a big advocate for the intersectionality of Black, Indigenous people of color, being neurodivergent, and being queer. So I'm from the island of Guam, and so I feel like I have a different perspective in that. I also have my own comic book called Brain and Bob now, and we're out on Amazon. You can find us on littlebrainstorm.com. And that's me in a nutshell. Grew up on the island of Guam, but I'll talk more about that. Thank you for having me.
No, it's great to see you again, Lorran. And And now, one and all, it's my distinct pleasure to welcome to ReggieCon the award-winning author of The Good Asian, Pornsak Pincetchote. Pornsak, please say hi to the audience and tell them a little something about why you love writing comics so much.
Hi, I'm Pornsak. I am also not a doctor, although no one's ever accused me of being one, much to the chagrin of my parents. I write comics and television. Why I love writing comics? I consider comics to be the tip of the spear of culture. It is because it is cheaper to make than the other sort of visual, media out there. It means we can take more chances. We can kind of, we can react quicker, I think, to sort of what's happening in the culture and take bigger chances to talk about it. And that's certainly what I've always tried to do with my books, especially with something like The Good Asian. I don't know if something like The Good Asian could have existed without being a comic first. And it's about comics.
Thank you for that. And I have to tell you, there were times reading this when I could tell that every degree of freedom in the comic genre was being utilized to great effect. It's really a stunning piece of work. So all of you out there who might want to ask questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Oh, it looks like there might already be stuff in the Q&A. Let me just check it. Yeah. Well, we're just going to start with a question. What the heck? Malia Fuller asks, hello, as a Pacific Islander myself, what is one thing you want readers to take away from this book? And what rituals within culture do you think are represented in the book that allows culture to continue to live?
Wow, that's a big question. What was the first part of the question again?
Yeah. Okay. So, what do you want readers to take away from the book, and what rituals within culture do you think are represented in the book that allow culture to continue to live?
I mean, I think there's a lot. I think when you're writing anything, there's sort of like a nested tree of things you want people to sort of take away from sort of what you're writing. I think the first very primary one that I'll use as sort of my first headline is one of the things that was the impetus of writing The Good Asian was writing something that was uniquely Asian American. I think a lot of the times that when, people talk about Asian Americans, they just sort of lump Asians, they lump Asians in there. And so I wanted to make a book, and because at the time, I hadn't seen many books like that. I hadn't seen many things in pop culture that was like that, and then specifically comics, that was specifically Asian American. I think most of the time when things were targeted towards Asian Americans, it was actually more about Asia, which is nothing wrong with that. But I think the challenge I set up for myself for The Good Asian was I wanted to be something specifically Asian American. So I think that was sort of the big. And I think everything after that was kind of like a little bit of a subset of that sort of bigger goal. And now what was the second part of the question?
So are there any rituals indicated in the book that allow culture to continue to live? What are the kind of things that might be in the book about the culture that allow the culture to sustain itself?
I would like to think so. I don't know if I'm the right person to ask the question to. I think that's always more of a question to the audience than the author, personally. But I think there was sort of the attempt to, in talking about, in framing something uniquely Asian American, I think it was acknowledging the unique Asian American history. And through the unique Asian American history there, and through those specific, I think that is where, culture kind of blossoms from that. But if anything, I think one of the questions the books ask is, what is Asian American culture? What is, uniquely Asian American culture? And I'm not sure the book answers that as much as it asks the question and sort of says, well, here's the roots of Asian American history. And these are some of the ways it's been applied, in the 1930s, whether it was, the Chinatown club scene and all that. But I think one of the questions, the first question I think the book asks is sort of like, what is Asian American? What is Chinese American? Really, what is Asian American? What are Asian American themes? And then what does Asian American culture look like? So I think for all those reasons, I'm not sure if I'm the right person to ask what traditions it's a part of, but hopefully I'm another voice, saying here's some of the stuff it started from, and maybe people from there can kind of draw their own conclusions and help define it.
No, I appreciate your answer on that. And folks, I have to apologize. I've made a huge mistake. I've left Julius back in the green room. So I have another panelist to bring in here. Last but certainly not least, writer-producer Julius Vladimir Francisco. Julius, please come in and tell the audience who you are and what you do. Sorry, man. Make sure you...
That's okay. I just want to have a plug of the latest radio play, and now it's free, that you could listen to. Jeff Lindsay, the writer of Dexter, is the protagonist on this recent radio play that we did, not actually the bad guy. I play a Asian character, and it's called The Widow. I think you're gonna really like that one.
All righty then. So what we're going to do here at ReggieCon, and for the people in the audience, I've asked each of the panelists to select their favorite page or frame from the comic. I'm going to share that image with the audience, and I'm going to ask that panelist to tell us why that frame spoke to them. And the first frame I'm going to put up is the one that Lorraine sent me. Lorraine, when I sent this up, please let me know if you can read it, if reading is something you wanted to do, because I'm working on a laptop and everything looks really small here. But hold on. Can you read that? If that's what you want to do.
I'm unable to read it, but you know what? I have a screenshot of it and I can read it from my phone. How's that?
All right, that's perfect. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for being adaptable.
Yeah. Adaptability and resiliency, right?
Word.
Word. All right. So this frame I chose, so I will just read this. If those who have read the book, they know it's the part of towards the end of the series. I think of chop suey. It's made at every Chinatown restaurant, and it's the first thing Americans order. They've no idea chop suey is not from China. They don't know it was invented here in Chinatown to make Chinese food, to make Chinese people seem less threatening. And to an extent, it worked. Americans became comfortable with it, even though it's neither Chinese nor American. It's something new, made from circumstances it took to survive. And now America assumes it was always there. So there was so much that I wanted to say about this that, and I'm sure, when Scott reminded us to send the panel, I had to be the first one in because I was like, I know what I'm going to say. I know which one that kind of made everything sort of accumulated the story for me. And this is exactly what I go and I talk about. And I affirm my students when I talk about the Asian American experience that we are not a monolith. And there's so many different types of Asians, and then let alone Asian Americans. So how do we explain that experience, but to individualize ourselves about it? So I actually wrote something, if you don't mind that I read it to you, about it, and I will try and shorten it as quick as I can. So basically, this panel about chop suey has a lot of meaning for me for several reasons. I grew up in the 1970s, 80s on the island of Guam, and my parents who raised me made sure that I always had food to eat. My mother was not very affectionate, but her way of telling me that she cared about me was to ask if I had eaten yet. My father who raised me was African American, Southern gentleman who grew up during the Depression, so food was highly valued. Food was a language that both my parents knew well and shared between them. It was also a currency of their affection to each other and their community as well. My Louisiana-raised father met my mother in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. As a Black American engineer who built bridges across the Mekong Delta, my father was a sight to see, standing at 6 feet tall and his skin as brown as the red dirt. When my father set up his offices in my mother's village in Kenta, word got around that an American, not a blonde American, but a Black American was setting up an office and needed secretaries. My father had a team of translators who hired many women from the village. One day when my father went to inspect his office, he noticed a woman he had never met before seated at one of the typewriters. My mother had boldly gotten dressed up in the morning and went to the office as when the office opened up and sat at a desk with a typewriter as if she had belonged. Before the translators were about to kick my mother out, my father stated that she could stay as he admired her boldness. From that moment, my father was smitten by her. They married and moved to Guam, as Guam was the closest U.S. territory to Vietnam. As Vietnam raged on and my mother desperately looked for her family who escaped the war by boat, my mother eventually had an affair and I was a product of that affair. Despite that I did not look Black like my father, he raised me as his own, and I believed I was half Black until the age of 27 when my mom revealed the truth to me. I never brought up to my Black father that I was not his biological daughter, and he died the week that my son was born, believing that he had at least one grandson in the world. So I tell you the story of my background to tell you why chop suey meant a lot to me. Much like the dish, I did not identify as Vietnamese, nor African American, nor Black American, and I certainly was not able to identify as my biological father's family either, as my mother had so much shame in her affair that she was very unkind to me, and every time she glanced at me, I was a reminder of her affair. So I also did not identify as Indigenous, Chamorro from the island of Guam. I was chop suey, someone with a blended family, a little mixture of here and there. So much like the legend of the invention of chop suey, I believe that chop suey was created by, it was believed that chop suey was created by a Chinese chef in San Francisco in the late 1800s who gave into the demands of drunk American miners who came into a Chinese restaurant late in the night. So the chef stir-fried leftover scraps of vegetables and meat and call it shap shui, which is Cantonese for miscellaneous scraps. So I often felt so much like throwaway scraps. So that's one way I felt like that. However, the more likely origin of that story, of that chop suey, was probably originated from Taishin, Guangdong, the southern Chinese region where many of the early Chinese immigrants came from, and the Cantonese term chop suey means odds and ends, referring to a dish mixed with meats and vegetables served with rice, often inexpensive and flexible. So I learned to survive, much like the story in The Good Asian, and be flexible despite feeling not wanted and discarded. So why does chop suey matter to me? Because it reminds me that even scraps, odds and ends can be made into something sustaining, even beautiful. Like the dish itself, I'm a mixture of complicated histories, a Southern Black man who loved me unconditionally, a Vietnamese mother who couldn't always show it, a biological truth revealed decades too late, and an island upbringing that never quite felt like it belonged to me. But chop suey is more than just leftovers tossed together. It's resourceful, it's survival, it's culture born of compromise. It fed railroad workers and miners, and later entire communities trying to carve out identity in a place that didn't always welcome them. It told a story of people making do with what they had and still finding flavor. In that way, I've come to see myself not as discarded, but as intentionally, carefully assembled, seasoned by resilience. Chop suey may have been born from scraps, but it became a dish that endured, and so did I. So this is why I love that panel.
Pornsak, would you like to respond?
That's a lot to respond to. First of all, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for picking that page. As much as I allow myself to have pride over stuff I do really like that page. And so I love that you picked it. But I really love the story that you tell. And it's funny. I did not know the tenor of the conversation, so I probably should have prepared myself to if it was going to be as emotionally raw as it is right now. I'm like, oh God, I have so many feelings. I need to I need to be in control of. But it was a really beautiful story, and as you were talking, it reminded me of something I don't think. First of all, I didn't know the linguistic sort of roots of the word, and so that I found very interesting. So thank you for telling me that. And it's a funny thing too. I think that as we're talking, I also sort of thought one of the things that you see a lot, especially in Asian families, we don't talk about history and we don't talk about that and all that. But at the same time, though, oddly enough, cuisine is a story that is passed along to us that does not have language, and yet we do receive that story. It is a link to us in so many ways. So even though, the different cuisines that we're given isn't, there isn't a linguistic, there's nothing linguistic that tells us something. It does give us a root to something, whether we're aware of it or not. And I don't think I realized that until when I was writing it, until you were sort of talking about sort of your story about how in so many ways food gives us that tether to a thing that maybe to a history we've never talked about and never experienced, but we still feel that we have access to. So, but thank you. No, I'm glad that it is it's a page I quite like. It is every book that I write. There's usually one line in the book where I'm trying to. When I start the book, I want the book to teach me something, and something I didn't know before. And that page was really important to me for the thing that I learned, which is, I think, a page later, maybe 2 pages later, that, there's a line, I think, that goes something like, being American is fighting for something new. And I think I really believe that. And it took that page for me to sort of crystallize that. And I really appreciate and love your story.
Thank you for that. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I just have the book and I just wanted to read that line because nothing's more American than fighting for something new. And that is absolutely, the truth of my existence.
Any other panelists want to comment? If you do, just open your mic. If not, I'll ask one of the questions from the audience.
All
right then. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was as Lorran, as you mentioned about, there are so many different Asians in America. I think I'm that type of Asian, I'm not American. I am Asian though, and oddly enough that while I have worked with, a wide range of individuals as a school psychologist now, you call me, I don't know, applied behavior analysis / psychologist / school psych, whatever you call me. I've been working with a lot of people except Asian Americans, and this book, fantastic comic book, just got me to understand better about Asian American history. And this is like an Asian learning about Asian American history. And I loved that a lot of scenes struck me, sometimes confused me, which I love about reading, learning. I need that shock to stay at the moment and think about, reflect, and do further research, understand about certain things, So with that, I feel like, I don't know, I appreciate this opportunity to read about the comics book. And I love to have panels and folks to have resonated mindsets or sometimes different mindsets, right? So I just want to point out that different identities within Asian community, and I'm that unique person of that community, I guess.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So my clients being up here in the Bay Area in Northern California, I have a lot of Filipino students. I have a lot of Asian American students. I have actually Polynesian students as well. So having books like this is really important that we could talk about. I'm working with a Filipino comic book company now called Dewata Comics, and we're creating comic books for the new Filipino American experience. And I think it's really important that we recognize and honor that. And even within Asian American experience, there's the generation, right? I'm definitely an older generation since I was, from a product of the Vietnam War. So I think it's very important that we talk about that intergenerational trauma as well.
Okay, on that note, go ahead. Was someone talking?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to chime in because I thought it was a really good point. I mean, part of the question of the book of sort of what are Asian American themes is very much, I think, the question that Lorran brought up at the top, which was just the fact that certainly when I was writing it and when the question came up, it was I think my friend Keith Chow who had sort of who had pointed out that you look at Latinos, and Latino captures many different sort of backgrounds. It's Cuban, it's Mexican, it's South American. But at the end of the day, Latinos are at least connected by language. Asian Americans aren't even that. And so when that's not even true, then what does connect the Asian American experience? I have a friend who jokes that like the only thing that connects the Asian American experience, just like the heavy reliance on starch, but it's just like what is that thing? And that's part of what the book is about, is that like how do you talk about the Asian American experience? And even part of the challenge of the book roots itself in the Chinese American experience, because to me, that was the start of the Asian American story the start of the Asian American story. But it's certainly not limited to that. And so there, it's just trying to figure out, okay, from that very specific experience, how do you, unravel that thread to talk about Asian America in general?
All right, excellent. And on that note, we're going to go to Sujeung's frame. Sujeung, can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe I can just start out by maybe connecting my thought with what Lorran just mentioned, the intergenerational trauma, intergenerational connections within Asian immigrant and Asian American families. And this one really resonated with me. I mean, there were a couple more that I felt like really kind of beautifully captured the just constant tension between opposites that particularly maybe Asian immigrant, maybe first generation immigrants like myself may experience. So I don't identify myself as an Asian American, and I am originally from South Korea. I'm first generation Asian immigrant, and it took a while for me to identify myself as an immigrant. I consider myself international for a while, and then I finally changed. I found myself identifying more as Asian immigrant. But then I'm still, othered, as Scott mentioned earlier a little bit about the concept of othering. I realized that, I'm still othered as a foreigner or international. So just because of, obviously my Asian morphology and also my accent and stuff. But then, so when I read this book, I felt like it's a story about a long time ago, but I was a little, I don't know, not saddened, but I felt a lot of raw emotions, like Pornsak mentioned, because I saw a lot of parallel between what happened back then and then what's happening, what are experienced by people in our community, even these days. And but I felt like when I see Asian Americans, my kids, or I work with the Asian American Student Coalition on campus, and when I interacted with them, it was just so moving to see them feeling a lot more entitled with claiming their space in America, claiming, their, identity as an American. I mean, it was really powerful to see how, they were strong, outspoken, and entitled, unlike me as an Asian immigrant. So it was really empowering to see. And when I read books like this, well, particularly this one, I mean, it was really personal. It felt really personal. So I know that I tend to over-identify with things. I kind of tried not to. But then the more I thought about it, there was no way that it cannot be, or it shouldn't be personal. I mean, we are all very different how we take on things. It's different. I cannot help projecting my experiences and my take onto this. And this one, and there were a couple more scenes that really beautifully captured the constant tension and conflict that I sometimes feel. I don't think a lot about them, but I sometimes realize I have been on that tension the whole time. So it says another Oriental trying to survive. So, I sometimes feel that way. Yeah, another Asian, just trying to survive. And one way of surviving is not to be visible. And we always kind of complain how invisible we are, although we are so, I live in the Midwest and I'm hyper visible, but obviously I feel quite invisible. Being invisible is safe because, I don't get a target of, othering, but at the same time, it's sometimes kind of painful. So there's always kind of tension. I want to stay safe by being invisible, but feeling like, I don't exist, it's also painful. There is a tension there. It says beautifully here, and like anything staying hidden for too long, it risks getting lost. I sometimes feel like my old friends talk about how I was back in Korea when I was still in the country, and I just cannot believe them. Was I like that? Was that really my personality? And well, and because who are we then? So beyond the work we take on. So sometimes I feel like, I, as a hardworking traditional Asian, I'm useful. So therefore, I'm a good Asian, I guess, in this sense. But then, what does it mean to be a good Asian? So that I felt some resentment for having to be a good Asian to others' eyes. And then the legacies we inherit. So how I took on that line was that I sometimes that people feel a lot more comfortable with talking about Asian legacies, like tangible legacies such as costumes, like foods, like Lorran mentioned, and like calligraphy or things like that. And but there are a lot more than that, and we are a lot more than what can be consumed, so there is that tension. I really want my legacies to be acknowledged and appreciated, but at the same time, I want to claim that there are a lot more than foods and clothings and things like that. In that space between our obligation to ourselves and our people, what's left? Who are we? So I think I don't know, those lines resonated a lot with me. So I sometimes ask, what am I really? What is the authentic me? So I sometimes cannot help. So I sometimes try to intellectualize my experience by thinking, okay, so I am from a collectivistic cultural background, and I define people from collectivistic culture. They define themselves in relation to others rather than their own individual personal characteristics. So I really cannot help just making constant efforts to define who I am in relation to this new kind of host culture. And So in doing that, I try to figure out what's the expectation. And at the same time, I don't want to meet up to the expectation. I want to be myself. But then at the same time, what am I if I mean, who I am is that I define myself in relation to others, and I'm trying to be good to other people. That's who I am, and then I resent that. So that's so I think, I don't know how I took on the themes here, is that they beautifully captured my constant conflicts. So there was a line in the book that said something never changes or something. So that resonated with me a lot. But at the same time, I felt like nothing really settles. Nothing really is the same for me. Nothing is never, determined for me. So so that's what I got out of this frame.
Pornsak, did you want to respond to Suejung?
No, I love that. It's funny. I think these things are designed to make me feel very egotistical. That panel came up and I was like, oh yeah, I really like that one too. It's like one of the first things that sort of came up that I think someone had mentioned it while the book was coming out. It's mine that I liked a lot, about how so much of the Asian American experience comes down to defining sort of life within that hyphen, and that hyphen between Asian and American, like the entire experience is that hyphen right there, and trying to distinguish what that hyphen is and what that hyphen means. And and it's the difference between Asian and America. It's the difference between collectivist thinking and individualist thinking. It is the difference between the obligation we have to our families and the obligations we have to ourselves. So yeah, and I guess it's funny. It's been a while since I've lived with this book, so I forgot that it talks about that particular page talks about that. And so it's but yeah, to me that book is sort of the question at the heart of it, that trying to determine who are we, and trying to see what are the different things that make us who we are. I really appreciate you taking out that page. It's funny hearing you talk about it and seeing it again. There are moments I'm like, oh yeah, I guess this was a pretty good book.
That's great. I'm going to go to a student question real quick from Ava Fournier. How do mixed racial identities challenge our borders of race regarding personal, social, political, and cultural identity?
That is a really good question. We get into it. I want to say we get into it a little bit in the book, not into any depth not in as much depth as the topic deserves. Part of the project of the book and the challenge of the book was that in calling yourself something as a good Asian is to not to hyper specify it to any one particular experience, but to show many different facets of that experience to the degree that I could. And so there was an attempt to get into a little bit of that. In some of my other work, there was I did a thing called the Manchurian that is collected in a book called The Horizon Experiment that's out now, where I talked a little bit more about the Hapa experience. But I've always been fascinated with the Hapa experience for all that reasons. I have many friends who are mixed race. I think we all do. I have many friends who are Hapa, and it's just so it is an interesting, in terms of shedding light on stuff. It's something else I really was interested in specifying, even the little bit that it does in The Good Asian, specifically because storytelling done in broad strokes has a tendency to flatten things, and it flattens cultures. And I think one of the things that happens is that oftentimes being mixed race and being non-mixed race is seen as the same thing, and it is portrayed as being the same thing. And as a result, it has the effect of erasing out both cultures to a certain extent. So I think the effort there was to do a little bit of that in the book, within the context of the book. I will admit, it's something I wanted to get into more in later work, which is why I devoted a whole other sort of it's just 24 pages, but a one shot and to just that.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to respond to the student's question? Jump on in, guys.
This is a question that I often ponder about, talk about, to have discussions about in private, in public all the time. It is true that when you have such mixing of cultures, sometimes it gets so blended that it might even get blended out and watered down. My son is half white, and so now he's a quarter Vietnamese, a quarter Filipino. That's my biological side, and so then it's like, how do I help him, appreciate the different mixtures? Like, I feel more related to being Chamorro, to Guam, than I do being Vietnamese, Filipino, or even Black. And then my next culture that I feel closest to is Black, So my son and I have multiple discussions about what it's like to come from a chop suey family. And I think it's very important to have those perspectives. Today's his birthday. He turns 14. And especially for the young generation, a lot of my students who are Filipino try to hide their Filipino-ness. They don't understand Tagalog. Like, I don't understand it. I was never really raised with it. So I think what it is learning the history. And this is why I appreciate The Good Asian so much, is because it takes the steps, it takes the time to explain how Asian men weren't allowed to get married unless they were already married. There's a whole history of the defeminizing of Asian men, which I think is very important. And I think in this generation, my son's generation, is reclaiming what masculinity means for Asian men, for example.
Okay, then. From there, I think we will go to Shengtian's frame. Give me just a second here.
Okay, mine is quite complex, but yeah, I don't know. It was hard to pick one, picture out of the book, because it's so stimulating. It gives me a lot of reflection about my past life, which is a life before coming here, and the early life in the US. I've been here about to be 14 years. But I think, there was a time that I was mostly in a, maybe still confused, in a more of a confused phase, survival mode. Of course, I was enjoying all of it, It was my choice to come here. Now I'm living in a little different condition. Life is, a little bit more stabilized, but identity-wise, it's still a bit confused. Inside of me is not confused, but in relation to other people, it's confusing. So I don't know. It gives a lot of different thoughts. So I'm not sure if I'm able to provide a organized, talk with this picture, but let me get that started, Let me see. Yeah, I think, so this is my thoughts, this is me, who is a Korean minority born in China, So I'm from that region in China where at the time, probably above 80% of people are like me, who speak Korean purely. And from elementary school, you start to learn Mandarin, but you don't use it unless you're taking a Mandarin test. And you will use Mandarin probably from university level. And I wasn't aware of my identity because everybody's the same at the region, Then I came to US, and then I realized, okay, I'm pretty different, I guess nationality is Chinese, but Chinese wouldn't think of me as a Chinese. It's very, very interesting. When you talk with my Chinese fellows, they'd be like, are you sure you're Chinese? They call me like, you look like Japanese, you look like a Korean. I heard a lot of stuff. And when I talk with my Korean friends, they do the, I don't know. It's hard to fit in as a Korean born in China, because Korea, South Korea is a very homogeneous community, in my opinion, if you compare to US community. And I think, people like me will be perceived very different. So it's hard to fit in. So when I come to US, my automatic thought is, okay, do I have someone like me nearby me? Nope. I've been living in where? Rhode Island, Iowa, Mississippi, Omaha, Salt Lake City. Now it's normal. How many people I've seen, like, from my background? I probably have seen 5, 6 people, maybe including 2 random people I've seen in Atlanta sauna in a naked environment. I don't know if you guys know about this Korean sauna. It's like everybody get naked and you take shower and then go home. And I met my hometown people and talk with them. So for me, it's difficult to find people like me in the US. That's what I'm trying to say. And I wasn't actively exploring about, hey, what if people like me living in the US, what they might have experienced, what I can learn from them so I can live a wise, intelligent sort of life. And I'm like, there's no way I can explore that because I really can't find those kind of people. Then I'm reading about this book makes me realize while there are many different kind of Asians, we do share a lot of experiences. We do share a lot of traumas, and people do, beautifully showing their resistance and survive. And it's not survived by being individualistic manner. It's creating a community and support each other. And that kind of makes me think, okay, look at me, I'm living in that way too. Without actively looking for those community, I feel like I'm just being part of the community or being included in that kind of community. I'm also a contributor of that kind of community, like supporting each other, even though we don't know each other. We somehow understand each other and support, and I'm being supported. And I feel like this communal characteristic of support and resistance that I read from this book is beautiful. And I think it's being consistently shown in the society, in the US, That's one of my reflection. And maybe another thing that I would love to mention is, again, I'm not American, I don't know, I don't have lived experiences about those difficulties and traumas that people have experienced in this country. But it was humbling to recognize that, what looks like opportunity right now once was considered as a rebellion, even crime, That was interesting and pretty painful to read as well. I don't know how Dr. Han has thought of this, studying abroad and, being immigrant in this country. My perception was I was ready. I was like, hey, I want to learn English. I want to experience diverse culture in this country. And I know it's not going to be easy. I have no family, no nothing. My parents are going to be support the education. I need to be successful. I will survive and I will make my life. Then come here and, I don't know. Then I think, I see the theme of survival through this book, and not only by me, but also, very cool to see, Dr. Han and Lorran also feel like, survival is a, common theme of Asian Americans, and I still sometimes feel like that's one of the theme of my life, like including this semester. And another thing that I would love to mention is, I don't know. It's very personal level, so I'm not sure if you'd be interested in listening to that, but before coming to US, I feel like one of my strengths is reading the room. In order to read a room, read the social cues, you need to know what has happened. How do you know how do you know what has been happening in the society? You talk with your elderly, people, your grandparents, your parents, your friends' grandparents, your friends, medias, and everything. I think I have limited, experiences about or knowledge about that. I don't know, probably it's coming from the survival instinct. When I was reading this comic book, I was like, what people have been experiencing in the past, because I don't know, maybe again, it's from survival standpoint, maybe as a, school psychologist and also a professor, maybe in the standpoint of empowering the future, psychologist to be able to protect themselves and protect children and their family and educators. And I appreciate that I got to know more like lived experiences about the forms of past discrimination might still linger in people's minds, even if it's invisible to people like me. I feel like that this book makes it more visible. That prepared to me to be survived. I don't know. It was a beautiful education experience. This comic book. Yeah, it's very scattered, but it's a personal journey when I was reading this book, and at the same time, educational, also about the community, all mixed feeling. And I think that's the beauty of this kind of book. It takes me to a different journey, and it takes times for me to digest it, which eventually leads up to growth to me.
Well said.
Yeah.
Very well said. Pornsak, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, no, you bring up two things that was that's very sort of like top of mind when I was writing it, is that, it goes without saying that, if I was a different person, the book would come out a different way. But I was born in America. I'm Thai. My father was half Chinese, which makes me a quarter Chinese. I grew up in Thailand for 5 years and then kind of came back. And it's funny, like, I think there was a minute, and maybe it's still happening, when people ask the questions like, who are allowed to tell what stories? And I found myself asking the question of just like, can I tell? Like, I am not fully Chinese American. I lived in Thailand. When we drill down, all of our experiences are so singular, are so unique. It becomes a question of, how does anyone have the right to tell someone else's story or tell a story that isn't theirs?
Right.
But then that's part of what fiction is. Fiction asks us to, empathize, to stretch beyond sort of what we know, and to sort of provide these bridges between and see sort of maybe the things that sort of connect us. And it makes you wonder if that is the entrance fee at the end of the day, is the question of, the question of, how do I fit in? And, how do I fit into this bigger thing is what qualifies you to be able to talk about it, in the first place. And I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it is a question, but certainly for me, there is a reason why. And it's very much the noir tropes, but it also thematically served the purpose as well of why it's about a Chinese American man who always felt outside his community for all the reasons why he would feel outside his community, trying to sort of see what his place in this community is. And a lot of that comes from the fact that, I'm not fully Chinese. I did not, there's a part of me that wonders if I would have had the questions I do about Asian American identity had I grown up in America my entire life and been surrounded by Asian Americans. And maybe the fact that I didn't, I feel like someone who's almost like an anthropologist, sort of coming in and being asked to connect, say, this is the bucket that you belong in, and trying to figure out, okay, so what do I have in common with these things, and what don't I? So that is very much sort of what the book is about trying to sort of see what does sort of connect all these disparate things. And and there was something out there, but now I was eluded my mind. So I'll just leave it at that first.
Okay, well, that's good. Thank you for that wonderful answer. We're going to go to Julius's frame. Students out there, what's going to happen is we have 2 more frames to get through. Once we're finished with those, we'll go directly to questions and go through the questions. And what I'll ask Pornsak to do is pick the question he'd like to answer, because some of them may actually ask things we've already talked about. But students, please know that any of you who've submitted a question will get credit for having done so. And on that note, Julius, the stage is yours.
And I must say, it was quite difficult to pick a panel, a frame, and we have to commend Pornsak for his writing. I'm a big fan of film noir movies, particularly from the 40s, and consider the top two best is Double Indemnity and the one with Robert Mitchum and Bette Jenger, which name escapes me for some reason, even though I watch it once a year. It feels like that, and when it comes to graphic novel form, it harkens to You've Killed Me by Joel Jones, and also the Parker adaptations by Darwin Cook. So I just have to like commend Pornsak for it was a well-deserved Eisner. And the panel that I ultimately picked was kind of very reminiscent of, I'm hoping that some of the people here have seen Sinners. And there was a scene in Sinners, and when I saw it in Sinners, I was like, hey man, that's Pornsak's graphic novel. Like, you know, it's like that scene where there was a confluence of all these races just having fun, and these Asian Americans commingling with other races, and how it's supposed to be is like, you know, one big party. And the mentality of our protagonist was like, what the hell? But the big line in it was, they're writing songs of love, but not for me. A lucky stars above, but not for me. And that hit hard. But before I saw Pornsak, like, I already read his works. I didn't know that because he was in a writer's room with like a bunch of like, you know, Hollywood people. And that hit hard because I identify with that, because I have a very unique experience, immigrant experience, because I grew up half and half. When I settled permanently in the United States, I've already spent elementary school, mostly in Asia, in the Philippines. And so I was mostly grown. I was a tween when I finally like lived here permanently. So I experienced the end of like the high school experience in the United States, kind of like the John Hughes experience from his movies in the 80s. But I have like, my mentality was I was watching Asian shows when I was a kid, like anime and Korean shows and Filipino shows. And the culture, my culture inside was Asian. And it was weird. Like I felt like I didn't really belong anywhere. Like where I'm descendant from the people who revolted against the United States. Like I'm a direct descendant of what will be equivalent in the United States as like the daughters of the American Revolution. I'm a direct descendant of basically the founding fathers of the Philippines. Basically, I'm the descendant of like our equivalent to Paul Revere, because it wasn't in my ancestral home where we tore up the citizenship papers and announced our revolt to the Spaniards. That happened in my ancestral house, which is now a park. So, and then when I came here, I felt so lost because like, it's like I don't feel I'm fully American. I don't feel Filipino. The way I describe myself is I feel like I'm the ocean. Like you bridge that gap. And then when you become like an Asian immigrant in America, you kind of adopt like an Asian American identity, because we kind of coalesce, because we're not a monolith, obviously, but there's shared experiences that Asian Americans go through. And even me, like I see that like the Asian experience in America is shaped by the American Empire. Definitely I am. I didn't know, for example, that 100 years ago when the Philippine-American War happened, that I'm descended from an American soldier that went native. So it's a story of like the Edward, and I was 27 when I found this, that basically my relatives said like, yeah, you're descended from like a character from an Edgar Rice Burroughs novel. Like your great grandfather is an American soldier from Pennsylvania that went native. And then we tried to petition them back in the 1910s and 1920s. He decided to stay in the Philippines. He was like, no, I'm not coming back. I'm not living that rural poor life. I'm staying here. So he married like one of the leaders of the revolution. So the thing is like, I feel that a lot of like the identity of Asian Americans is shaped by the American Empire. And so the way that Pornsak went about with this, like with the story, it hasn't been done. It was a really well-deserved Eisner. I can't wait for this to get adapted, and hopefully he adapts it like more in like an animated form, like Jay Oliva with DC, because he's not like the new Jay Oliva, for DC animated universe. So I hope he does it that way and get it produced, or they could do a live action, and this could be like the Asian American version of Sinners. But it'd be great, because every year I used to go all the time to the Film Noir Festival in LA. There was one San Francisco too, is the original, and I know Carrie Bible and like Eddie Mueller, which is like who started that festival. But it's been like a decade and a half since they I've had good correspondence with them. But that's how it felt like the story had the femme fatale energy about it. He was kind of like the character, the detective from Laura, another great film noir classic. I remember seeing those in like the Academy building, and so when I was reading his graphic novel, I was like, wow, like how great would the adaptation would this be of like a 2-season Netflix series, or like a long like 3-hour movie, like an American epic, done in the way like Godfather is.
Yeah,
it would be spectacular. There's just so many lines in there. Like the one thing that I identified, another one that I was thinking in my mind was, they talked about the line of perfect Asians kind of set me off. They have to have like the perfect stance, the perfect dress. And the reason why that sets me off, and he says this, is because perchance they allow you to dream. And what America is like when that rug gets pulled under you and you realize that dream, there is no dream. That is mostly a nightmare for a lot of people, for the great majority. And that hit hard, man. Like your lines, I would just say, like, he's so well read. Like, it's just so everything. Like, I do look up to him. I think he's firing in like all cylinders, and it's almost like his chakra system is completely balanced. Like a fully integrated person, for lack of a better word. Even though I'm not into that juju, but that's the best I could describe Pornsak. I really look to him as an inspiration. He's like someone who I would aspire to become. Very great. He hit it out of the park, sir. Like that's it. Right. That's the experience.
Pornsak, would you like to respond?
Thank you is the first part of the response. Thank you. To be described as a fully integrated person is means a lot to me, considering I rarely consider myself a fully integrated person. So it is nice to be thought of in that way. So thank you for the really kind words, honestly. And I think about that particular spread in particular, it is something funny when I look back on the book. The only regret I have, I might actually have more than just one regret, but one of the regrets I have is that I don't have more pages like that. The thing I love about that spread, it is very much about Asian joy. It's about Asian excellence, Asian joy, and that is sort of like when you talk about that moment in Sinners, like that. That's what to me was so powerful about that movie, is that the celebration of that, and is one of my, when I look back at the book, it is one of my regrets that I couldn't find more moments for that within the book. It is a noir, it exists in a dark world, but I liked having a moment of, celebrating excellence and Asian excellence and joy, and I'm glad that spread is there, and I wish I had more room for at least one or two more pages.
I was just going to add an addendum, and I forgot to finish my thought on that. Exactly, that's why I picked, because for all the darkness of your story, that was an example of Asian American joy, and that's what I do in my life. That's why I do the panels in Comic-Con about Filipino martial arts, and I'm known throughout the Comic-Con circuit of doing that. It's because I try to find joy in like darkness. Is we have to recharge our batteries to the fight that's coming, that's about to unfold on us. And how do you do that? You have to find glee. You have to find joy. Not in someone's pain or suffering, but in that song and dance that transcends dimensions.
And I think, I never really thought about it this way, but I guess the other sort of piece in the book that is about Asian joy is in a different way, and it's about Asian resilience. It's the page that Lorraine brought up about chop suey. It's a different type of joy, the joy of resilience. And so those are the two pages that I'm proud we were able to get those in there.
Thank you so much for that. And what I'm going to do now is share the page that I picked. I can't speak to the Asian American experience, but I can speak to good writing. And I can speak to currents in characters coming together, colliding, and then coalescing. And I thought this bit of the story here, sorry, I know I'm a chatterbox. I know it doesn't help. Baba says that's my problem. Because a good Chinese woman's the family's backbone, strong and quiet. Americans get to be strong and loud, but I'm tired of being strong and quiet. I don't know how to be strong and quiet. I think about everything Baba gave up for me, and I just want him to be happy. But some days I don't know how without making me miserable, and it feels like every choice I have means betraying someone. And you don't know when that started, but every day it just gets worse. All right, I very much appreciate the tension that was able to be brought clearly with words. And why that matters is because you've all seen that. I'll stop sharing it. Hold on. Being able to bring language, being able to bring words to our emotions actually helps helps us control them, helps us get a grip on them. And when we can take the kind of tension that's being expressed and put it clearly into words, we've done the world and ourselves a huge favor. And then to have him be the one who responds is that moment of pure resonance between the two characters. And they're resonating in a space of tension. And I find that when you're in a state of tension and you can have that level of resonance with someone, those are the moments when you feel most seen. When all that tension, all the things that have come together are what you're clearly communicating about. So I just wanted to congratulate you on the book, but the little scenes like that might feel like they just go by, don't go by. They're very well tended to, and I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for that. I love me a monologue, and I love getting a chance to write a monologue. And that monologue in particular, I get choked up. I get choked up writing it. I get choked up reading it. I get choked up listening to it. Yeah, it means a lot. That one means a lot to me. And yeah, and I also think too the thing that was important to me about that, beyond the obvious of just like, getting to hear that perspective from that character, but also too, it was that the added layer of that sense. On a plot level, Hark is a race traitor. He polices his own kind, and what was important to me was that, and again, it goes back to the life within the hyphen, is that to a certain degree, that feeling was sort of laid in on him. It was an experience that he kind of was born into. And so everything that Lucy is talking about why she's letting down the people that she loves, he has always felt. And so in a way, doing what he did was a natural, it wasn't as big of a, that the seeds of that were already planted way before he became a police officer, before and all that. And it was in his identity.
Yeah, very, very cool. I appreciate your comment. So look, here's what we're going to do. I said I was going to have Pornsak do all the work, but I want to give the rest of the panel, the audience, the rest of the panel a chance to talk as well. So here's what we'll do. Pornsak, can you see the chat?
I don't know. Where would it be?
I think it's across the top of my screen. Next, there's chat, Q&A, people, raise, react. I don't know if that's what you guys have it across the top of your screen. If one of you could tell him where you see chat or Q&A on your screen, that might help, because I may have a different screen because I organized it.
Yeah, I don't see it on my screen.
All right, then can any of you see chat or Q&A?
Okay.
Okay, here's what we'll do then. I'll read a question for you to answer, and then my colleagues, they can keep up with me in the chat, and then we'll go through and I'll invite one of them to answer a question and we'll go from there. So the question is, Georgine, I'm gonna skip this question because we've talked about othering in the text a lot. I gotta go down here a bit. Lorraine, Georgine, all right. All right, this is from Lainey Korvik. In what ways do the characters in The Good Asian internalize or resist the othering they experience, and how does that shape their actions and relationships?
I mean, I think it defines all of their relationships,
Yeah.
defines their identity. All the way down to the title of the book, The Good Asian, where they're expected to be a certain way in order to sort of be treated as a full person. So I think everything that they do is a reaction to being othered, and a reaction to sort of being seen as good enough to be, there is something I think about a lot is the comedian Hassan Minhaj talks about, he has a special called Homecoming King, where he talks about his father believing in the American dream tax, about how if you're an immigrant here, you do not get the same rights as a citizen does, and he learns to live with that. But Hassan Minhaj, having been born here, he feels the audacity of equality, and I think all of these people are wrestling with the idea of the American dream tax.
Fantastic, thank you for that. We're going to go on to Emily Dunlap's question. And Lorraine, can you see Emily Dunlap's question?
I cannot. So you'll
All right,
have to read it to me.
Not a problem. I'll just read these to you guys. How about that? Okay. So how does the othering of Asian Americans change through the generations?
I think. Go ahead. Go ahead, Lauren.
I think for me, what I've noticed, because, I turned 50 this year, y'all. I turned 50. So also the fall of Saigon was 50. Okay. So that was this year. I was born 2 months before the fall of Saigon, and I am not like the others. So a lot of my family were boat people. And, I consider myself a 1.5. I don't consider myself like a first generation. I don't consider myself a second generation, although I feel closer to a second generation than I do from the first generation. And I think, unfortunately, I'm part of that Asian society where I take burdens, and I feel like, to be part of the good Asian, I do incorporate that myth of, I'm going to mask. And this is the other thing that we haven't talked about the good Asian, is about the literal masking that the Asians have to do to fit both in a white world and an Asian world. And I think throughout the generations, I think we're becoming more knowledgeable, and we're seeing it more on the outsider's perspective, and then we're honing in, and we're trying to stop that intergenerational trauma. So that is why I became a school psychologist. I didn't become a psychologist. I became a school psychologist so that I could work with families. I could go into the system and try to destigmatize the need for therapy, for families, for children, for those who are experiencing that. And I feel so fortunate and lucky that my clients, the people that I work with, are Asian American from that different experience. And so I can talk about stopping that trauma, that they don't have to be the model minority, because that's just a myth. It's a myth that came up, in Berkeley, 1968, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I think, with TikTok, with, talking about mental health, I think there's a lot of forward motion of trying to destigmatize the need for mental health. And I'm so thankful for Gen Alpha, Gen Z, Gen whatever, and I think it has changed. I mean, I don't know, Scott, you're working with college students. You tell me.
Oh, no. The transformation of gender going on in I'll say Gen Z, one of the things people aren't paying attention to is the cultural deselection of toxic masculinity that's going on in this restructuring of gender. That is a major accomplishment. And for one gender or one generation to sort of not obliterate toxic masculinity, but redefine sexuality and gender in ways that make it not as make others less vulnerable to something like that, and therefore doesn't allow it to survive. I'm stunned. Fantastic. Yeah. So yes, absolutely. I have a question here for Julius. And after Julius answers, I'm going to ask the Pornsak answer, because this is Julius, you talked about relating to sinners. How do you other in your writing from other sources such as sinners in a way that allows the story to be its own separate thing?
Man, why they gotta ask me non-Euclidean geometry questions? Huh, damn. Okay. I know that some of the people, like I'm one of the youngest members of Ray Bradbury's cadre of Group 2.0. I'm not the youngest guy anymore. I think what it is okay. Pornsak did this really well in the story, which was basically so many of the Asians were defining themselves and wanted to get close proximity to whiteness so that they can gain more power, right? And that's how they self-select other themselves, which is devastating. Which is, to me, like the central sin in the story was that scene. That was like what messed up our main character was what his mother told him in that panel. Do everything right. Follow their rules. Don't give them a reason not to have you. Can you do that for Ma? Can you? Talk about toxic. Talk about how that will mess up a kid. I mean, that's it. The whole othering yourself, just so you could get accepted. And so many Asians do that. And Pornsak nailed it so much. The nail that sticks up gets hammered down. That Asian phrase, I've heard that so many times. The Western mentality is no, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. That's what we need. Because for all our supposed like advancement in like academics, how come we don't have that same representation when we become a partner in a law firm? How come the leadership is still not us? Same thing when it comes to like Silicon Valley or Wall Street. When you're producing like the majority of like what's going to finishing BAs, MAs, PhDs, but yet like that top talent pool of like a 1% that lead the Fortune 500, it doesn't track. It doesn't. It's not congruent with the percentage of graduates that we got. When in fact, if we're the majority, shouldn't we also be the majority when it comes to leadership? That's the reason. It's because of that internalized othering, that you're othering yourself. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to get out of that mentality, because that whole like the nihilistic stuff gets hammered down is baked into like a lot of Asian culture, our filial devotion, that type of thing. I mean, I have it, you know, I don't know. That's a hard question, but that's how I would write it.
How about you, Pornsak?
Yeah, no, I think all of that. I think, you know, a lot of that sort of familial devotion, you know, it is an interesting thing where I feel like, you know, Asians sort of, we're more, you know, the culture is more collectivist. And it does sort of feel like, you know, whether intentional, it probably is intentional or not, like that mentality has been weaponized against us for all of that, you know, for everything that Jules is talking about, you know, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down and into sort of that thinking. And I think, you know, to go back to the question of just like, how do you, you know, sort of, you know, you respond to something like Sinners and you do something that's still your own? I think it comes down to, you know, one of the beautiful things about writing is that the more specific it gets, the more universal something gets. And it is one of those contradictions, and it's one of the fundamentally beautiful things about writing. And, you know, Sinners is a very extraordinarily specific story. Like the fact that, you know, there are two twins at the center of that story. And there are, you know, cultural reasons for that, but there are also very personal reasons that are part of Ryan Coogler's life, and just the fact that there is something about tracing when starting with specificity and tracing that truth to the source, you tap into something that's universal, and it's one of the most beautiful things and the most powerful things about writing. And I do think it is about taking, when you're looking at works like that, it is an invitation not for imitation, or the only thing that you're imitating is the impetus and the motivation to look at your very specific circumstances and to start and build out from there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask one more question. I'm going to give Suejung and Shengtian the opportunity to chime in here. How do language barriers and cultural differences serve as tools of othering in the graphic novel? Language barriers and cultural differences serve as tools of othering. You guys didn't know this was going to be a quiz. I mean, okay. Anyone then? I'm sorry I put you guys in the spot. I just wanted to give everyone the opportunity to chat, and those are the questions I've received. Go ahead, Suejung.
I guess I just am trying to understand the question, right? So language barrier and cultural barrier differences as tools for othering or being othered, or
how do those play a part in othering?
I think that's a kind of very explicit, visible marker and kind of justification for othering. So that's a clear marker that, okay, so now that question reminds me of this panel that I put together on bicultural integration, and one of the panel members was the second generation Chinese American. And he said that, but when he goes out to dinner or something with his first generation Chinese immigrant father, he tries to speak English loudly so that he makes it known to servers, to owners, to people around them that, hey, I'm not that type of Chinese. I speak the language. I belong here. So don't worry. I know how to do Midwestern banters. I know how to do small talk. So don't worry about me being, stone-faced or being awkward or not being able to understand what you're saying. So he just tries to make it known that so that he doesn't have to be othered. So I think that the language barriers, language difference, accents, and they are visible markers that, okay, you're different. So I think that just comes to my mind.
And I think in America too, markers of difference. People put you on a hierarchy of value based on your difference. So one of the things that when I was and still am working on sort of the Good Asian sort of show and adapting it, there was a big conversation about hey, the characters can actually speak Chinese. Like, we live in a world where people will read subtitles, but it was actually really important to me to sort of actually have them speak English. And we do a conceit where you understand that they're hearing Chinese, but you are seeing this English. And one of the reasons for that was, a lot of the stuff that happens with immigration, I think we forgive it because it's happening to foreigners. And what makes them foreigners is their language. But when you sort of see that happening to people who can speak English eloquently, then it gets suddenly a different context. And for me, and part of sort of what the book is about, and unfortunately you don't have to do this in the book, is the fact that immigrant first generation Americans are Americans. And so, and immigrants are future Americans. And so the things that we do to sort of the immigrant community is things that we're doing to Americans and to future Americans. And I think and part of the ways that we, the wall that we put up so that we don't have to feel that is language. That we say that, well, they're less than American because they don't speak English or they have an accent. And I think language is a sort of kind of a key tool that we use to sort of other and also to place people on a hierarchy.
I'm part of the people who experience othering, as soon as I step out of that small city where I grown up, that's where people speak the same language, Korean in certain way, Mandarin in certain way. As soon as I step out of the city, I feel othering in China. I've never been to Korea, but in Korea and in the US, because all of my language, I speak 3 languages, and all of the language has accents. So it's hard to be not being othered. Even let's say Asian, a lot of Asian cultures that's collectivist, that emphasize on the similarities than the differences. In the US, I think the differences that results from the culture is also filtered through the language that has accent. A language sometimes become a barrier, then automatically become being othered. I think, a quick examples would be, let's say our program has a game night, and they play a game that I've never played before. They use language that I never even knew. And without they try to be other me, I'd be othered because I have no idea. I'm just sitting there. And then, like Lorran said, I used my mask over there and then just sitting there and pretend to have fun. And that's just, ongoing experiences, And I bet a lot of kiddos with similar situations would, experience similar things, And I love that Lorran is actively advocating for the students and family at school. And that's amazing to hear.
You're on mute, Scott. Unmute yourself.
Julius, go ahead and follow up.
Yeah, the thing is that I'm curious, just like where Pornsak would take like another tale of like othering when it comes to the Hapa experience, because as an Asian American, we kind of have like a perpetual foreigner stereotype. For example, like even in Ray Bradbury's cadre for Group 2.0, I gotten that before when I was led into group. It's like they asking, "What are you?" Because like for a Filipino, I kind of have more reddish tinge to my skin, like almost like a rosacea. And then like I see myself ethnically as a Malay, because I'm Pinoy. I didn't even know about the European like admixture until later on. It's so little, I've always wondered like how that question would be asked like othering when it comes to like what Asian Americans becoming, because there's so much like interracial marriages within the Asian American community. Like how about like the Hapa experience? That's more direct question directed to y'all and Pornsak.
I mean, I can only speak towards, and I write about a tiny bit in The Good Asian and a little bit more in The Manchurian, another book that I have, where I can only speak to the Hapa people that I know, and I know the Hapa people that I know, and I'm sure the opposite exists, and I just talk to them less. The Hapa people that I know, specifically the ones that can pass for white, are very self-conscious about it, and they feel more of a sense of they feel both sides of the argument very, very much. They are very aware of the privilege that they have. They are very, and I think there is an equivalent of survivor's guilt that comes with that. And that is a piece of it that I find there. And I know there's on the other side. I'm sure that there's the other side. I know them less. They are less within my immediate circle, but I'm sure there's people on the opposite end of the spectrum who don't give it sort of any thought. I can at least, assume that. But the people that I know give it a lot of thought, and they're very aware of the privilege they have. They are very aware that they can, they can choose to lean in and lean away. And I think also for those people, if you were to ask them and sort of to be honest with them, they'd had different experiences with that through the different courses of their life, where I think, when they're younger, they might have taken advantage a little bit more or felt a little bit more comfortable as passing for whites. And on the opposite side of it, as they've gotten older, they felt a little bit more conflicted about that. So a lot of the Hapa people I know, and more than just the Hapa people, the mixed race people I know, specifically the ones that pass for white, have a lot of complex feelings. I mean, a lot of it comes with guilt, and a lot of it comes with figuring out where they sit. You know, a lot of the questions that we're talking about, they have all these questions, and but amplified in a slightly different way. So yeah, it's something I am very interested in.
Lorraine, I know you wanted to respond to that as well, and then we'll have to wrap up the show after that.
I actually wanted to respond back about using language as othering. I was thinking about like how even in school psychology, in the school system, we have English language as a second language, but now we've changed the vernacular to English language learner. So even with that, we're learning more about how language changes how we perceive things. And I think as a school psychologist, I think we have to, as an Asian school psychologist, less than 3% of the people of the school psychologists out there, you know, it's a rarity to have 3 Asian school psychologists to be on a panel. So this is amazing. I think it's really important for us, and we, you know, or maybe at least I will take the burden to try to explain to our colleagues and to other teachers out there about what emerging language looks like, what language looks like when you're learning it together, what it looks like when you're learning it one after the other. I think that's really important. And as for my son, he's Hapa, he's half white, half, you know, quarter Asian, quarter this. I am definitely teaching him about feminism, about strong male Asian role models. I think it's really important for him not to have any of that stereotypes. I mean, I think he sees people like BTS and things like that. I mean, like BTS has really changed how people look at, and like all the Korean dramas, right? All those Korean dramas have really changed the pop culture. You know, that demasculinity is not non-existent. Like Scott, what you were saying, you know, Dr. You know, like it's this generation. I just have so much hope, and I have so much joy for like the change. Like all the students that are listening, you know, I'm putting a little burden on you all that, you know, bring about this change. I'm excited. Like this is great.
Well, thank you for that, Lorraine. Truly appreciate it. And it's a little bit after 8:30 p.m. here Central Time. So unfortunately, that means we have to bring this amazing ReggieCon discussion to a close. Suejung, Shengtian, Lorraine, and Julius, thank you so much for joining us in the conversation this evening. Thanks for joining us at our ReggieCon celebration of Asian American and Pacific Islander Month, Heritage Month. Pornsak, it was an absolute blast discussing your work with you and getting to chat with you, and we look forward to the next time.
Thank you. This was wonderful. I'm so happy to be part of it.
Oh, that's fantastic. One last slide I have to share. Give me a second here. Where did it go? Okay, you're just going to have to stick with me. Hold on. There it is. I don't know why it didn't come up on my share option. Hold on. Let me try one more time. 3 windows. It's not coming up in my share option. It's horrible. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. What I want to do, this is our last episode of the season, right? So I want to take a moment to just thank the amazing people behind the scenes who every month make us look like we know what we're doing. I want to talk about Sean Thornton, who does all the amazing artwork for ReggieCon. Hopefully next year we're going to have a fundraiser for ReggieCon, and one of the things you can get in that fundraiser will be a collection of Sean's work that has supported ReggieCon. Of course, you've all met Dr. Jana Albrecht. She works in enrollment management in the provost's office, and she has been supporting ReggieCon for 5 years. Love you. Thank you for everything you do. She works with Summer Simmons over there, and Summer makes sure that all the right links go out to all the right people so we can all come together in this space. Danny Schroeder works in the university marketing, and she approves a lot of the stuff that we do, particularly if it includes a logo that involves Reggie. By the way, in case you know, ReggieCon comes from the fact that our mascot is a red bird by the name of Reggie, so hence ReggieCon. And then Kelly Harmon over in the Department of Psychology makes sure that all the right funds get to all the right people. So thanks so much to everyone for being here. Thanks to the audience members who showed up. Thanks to the students who sent in questions. And until next season, have a good evening.
Bye.
Yeah, all you guys don't have to leave. You can stick around. Yeah, don't have to leave. Let me just get. Hey, you can sit around and chat. People will. So.
I'm a big fan, and you're my idol, Pornsak. I was just about to say.
I appreciate that. Thank
What are you
you.
going to do? A screenshot? Screenshot.
Well, you guys got to look good. Come on now. Give me a screenshot worth taking. All righty then. There you go. Excellent. I took a screenshot. I'll send it to
Yay!
Thanks everyone for coming. It was a great conversation.
It really was. Can I reach out, Pornsak? Can I reach out to you, because we're reading this book for the San Diego Museum Educators Book Club. If you have time, we would love you to come too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Just reach out to me. I think we all have each other's emails. So.
Oh yay! Thank you. I will send an email. I appreciate it. I'm hosting.
Oh great.
I have a question directed to Shengtian. How does the culture differ from like Korean born in China to like Korean born in Osaka?
Korean born in Osaka.
You have those two like big communities in like the different countries, two big Korean communities, and one in Japan and one in. Yeah.
They do. I don't know. I feel like, when I say Korean born in China, then this Korean and, I don't know. It's interesting when I talk with the South Koreans normally that while there's a Korean and Chinese culture stick together, when I talk with the Korean, the Chinese culture pop up a lot in their mind. And I need to navigating the Chinese culture in their mind when I talk with them. But let's say when I talk with Chinese, the Han Chinese, when I talk with them, I have to explain the Korean side of me with them. Hey, so when it comes to Korean born in Osaka, I have no idea. Interestingly, my parents are living in Japan because my stepfather is Japanese. So when I visit my parents, I go to Japan. I don't go to Korea or China. Yet I have no idea about the life as a Korean born in Osaka. I do feel curious about that, though. Good question.
Okay, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Hopefully, we'll see all of you sometime in the next year on the con circuit. Have a great summer. If you're in San Diego, look me up.
Thanks so much, Pornsak.
See you in San Diego. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.